Hola, culés, and welcome back to Offside, Barca Football's YouTube channel. The transfer window is upon us almost, and so we thought, guys, that this time we will talk about players that might actually join Barcelona in the future and how would they perform in Flick's team.
If you remember 2 seasons ago, we could just not depend on our bench at all. We just didn't have any confidence on the bench. But today, the bench is delivering and delivering consistently. So we're going to talk about the strikers. And to talk about which striker we're going to talk about today, Dom, why don't you share the name?
So today, guys, we are talking about Benjamin Šeško. He's one of the most obvious soon-to-be elite strikers. Now, soon is the key word here because he is not an elite player just yet, but he has the fundamentals, he has the aspects, the traits to become such a player. But let's see, how does he play and how would he fit Hansi Flick's squad? So first thing I want to do is talk about Benjamin Šeško's profile and the way that he is used at his current team. Now, this is his heat map for this current season, and we have three main clumps that we have to analyze. First one is obviously inside the area. The second one is here between the lines and just a bit deeper. And then finally, the third area is the very deep area, which we'll just call the build-up phase. Now, obviously, you want your strikers to be very good in this area right here, inside the box. And Šeško does have a big presence, literally big presence because of his frame and his size. He has a big presence in the box. He can get at the end of the crosses, and he can also finish quite well, which we will see later on in the analysis. But he also does love to drop into these areas right here because he is an early stage of a Karim Benzema div where he has the finishing, he has those lethal touches, but he's also a player who likes to be in this area right here, receive the ball, use his hold up play, and then progress the play that way and get at the end of the passes inside the area as well. Now, these deeper areas right here, these pockets where he drops very deep, I think these are rare instances where he does that. And at Barcelona, he would not be tasked or asked or forced to be in these areas, but he can also do it because of his technical floor is very high. And he can be located in these deeper areas and actually be quite effective and not lose the ball, which is always going to be a big factor in how we perceive strikers because at Barca, you need to have a technical floor to be able to execute these things. And Šeško is very good at this. Now, let's take it a step forward and see what is Šeško's biggest strength in his build-up phase. Now, here we see Šeško again receiving the pass from this player right here. So he receives the ball and he has a guy on his back. Now, this is a massive part of Šeško's build-up phase prowess diff because he can actually look at the size of him. That's first and foremost. He can hold up the player on his back. He can withstand the contact. He rides contact really well, and then he turns into the space and he progresses the play. He can link up with the players. Let's say this guy charges into this zone right here. Šeško can withstand the contact, move the ball, move himself as well, and then he can combine with the players up the pitch.
The playing of the shoulder and his physicality, I think these are things that will definitely aid him. And that is definitely things that Barca will also look into a nine or a replacement nine once Lewandowski obviously finishes his contracts and moves on.
Just to be able to pin these defenders right here and withstand the contact, it's absolutely crucial because look, that opens up the space here because this defender then has to drop deeper to actually follow Šeško and try and outmuscle it, but he cannot really do that. So these players right here, so he can go into this space, and this player can then go forward, and Šeško can actually deliver balls. He can actually ping the balls in the back, or just maybe sometimes he does try the flicks and tries to be very creative and very smart about his passes. That doesn't always come off, as we'll see later, but he can actually absolutely do this. See, he receives the ball. I'll move it back. He receives the ball with a player on his back. He withstands the contact and then he plays the ball forward. Again, here, uses his arms well to protect himself, progresses the ball, uses his strength to just brute force his way through the defender. And I think this right here, the contact that we see here, he uses his arms really well to create a separation and keep the defender off him. And then once he creates that separation, he can actually run with the ball a bit more forward, which is exactly what he does in all of these situations. Look at here. Again, you look at that situation right there. He's using his arms really well to create the separation, using the frame to shield the ball because the ball is right here, and the defender has to go through or around Šeško to get the ball. However, due to his size and strength and just the way that he creates the separation, it's almost impossible for the defender to actually do that. So I think the build-up play is more about Šeško being a great target man and hold-up player rather than his sublime passing, which is good. So the passing is good, but just not at the elite level just yet. So now let's discuss the passing, because Šeško can be the layoff player. He can be the player that receives the ball in these areas right here, but there's a bit of an asterisk when it comes to this. The first thing that Šeško needs when he's receiving the ball from this area, from the deep, he has to drop deeper and receive the ball in this area. Šeško can receive the ball inside this area because this is the square that the opposition forms, and there is quite a bit of space for Šeško to receive the ball, and then he can successfully lay it off to a player that's on the sides or player that's diagonally to his left or right side of the pitch. Now he needs the space. If there's a marker on his back and Šeško tries to pass the ball immediately, as opposed to being just the physical presence who can hold up the defender, he needs the space and he needs clear targets. Now, this guy is a clear target, and Šeško has the space and the target to lay the ball off. And in those situations, he can actually do it quite well. When it comes to being tightly marked and doing the layoff, he will often complicate things. He will try to flex, he will try to back heels, he will try to be very smart, very fancy about it, and often it will fail. So this is actually the most important thing about Šeško. He will need that space. He will need to create the separation beforehand in term for his passes to be successful. Dev. Now, do you see this as a big problem for Barca, or do you think, okay, we can play around this potentially?
There are certain games where just the way Flick's team plays, the
Mhm.
spaces will be created because there are natural creators like Pedri, like Olmo. They can create space. But then there will be those low blocks that you will face in La Liga where you won't get that opportunity or where you won't get that freedom to move
Yeah.
about. And that might be a challenge.
He can be the guy who receives the ball in this area. And what does that create? That creates all the space right here. Now imagine a Rafinha running into that space, or Lamine receiving the ball from Šeško over here and then pinging the passes in that area. I think there is a huge possibility with Šeško actually being the profile that you need.
If he drops down deep, I don't think he will face this problem. It will be the problem when he is positioned as a nine in the box and he has to score, and there is not that much of space.
Next, I do want to discuss a bit of his transition play, because as good as he is in actually passing the ball to progress the play and link up, I think carrying the ball is where he thrives the most. Because when Šeško gets into his runs, into his full motion, he's nearly unstoppable because he has the power and the pace, but also the technicality to keep the ball at his feet at all times. And that's what we'll see in this image right here. He is controlling the ball really well with the outside of his foot. He can keep the ball glued to his body, but he also manipulates his frame really well. He's quite bendy in the way that he runs and the way that he changes directions very quickly. This is a tall guy. He's quite big, but he can also bend down, shift his weight fairly quickly, and brush off challenges really well. Let's have a look at that. So again, he's immediately attacked by a defender, but he can push him off. He can wiggle his way through a block, and then eventually he gets dispossessed. But still, it shows us that he is in control of the ball despite the full speed of motion, or just being at a high pace. And this here, again, an example where we have Šeško receiving the ball in a transitional period, in transitional state of the game, and then look at where he starts the run, and then he'll finish it way up there in the final third, because when he gets into that stride, he is nearly impossible to stop, as I keep alluding to. So let's look at this example right there. Receives the ball, shrugs off the defender, keeps running with the ball, dribbles sneakily, and then tries the shot. It doesn't come off, but it doesn't matter because he progresses the play, he makes things happen. And if Barca are to play this traditional style of football, which they do like at times, not just at times, often they do like that, I think Šeško would be lethal. He would be nearly unstoppable in those situations.
We've seen Rafinha do little bits of this season, right from the deep. The question is who plays? What's the combination between him, Lamine, Olmo, and Rafinha? I'm guessing those will stay even if Lewandowski goes. So there are many parameters like that on what that combination is, where you have Šeško. But from a stylistic approach, in terms of what Flick's Barca play and how his natural tendencies seem to align, I think it can fit in.
Next, I do want to talk about shooting, because Šeško is not an elite finisher just yet, right? He is someone who strikes the ball clean and someone who is very mobile inside the box, as we'll see later on. He does have good technique, right? So when you contort his body like this, for example, it does create better angles for shooting. I think he does have a variety of finishes. He can shoot with the inside of his foot, but he does prefer just go good old fashioned, smack it with everything you got, and shooting the ball with his laces. That's what he does most of the time. So Sheshko, when he does finish chances or just try to shoot, he'll mostly go for a power shot rather than placement. So he'll prefer power over placement. Now he does have a variety of finishes in his locker, but the sheer conversion and lethality is not there yet. However, what is there at the moment already is again this body manipulation that we see. So we see Sheshko receiving the ball inside the area. He does a very quick flick of his body. He can change directions very quickly. So that means that he's pointing this way and the defender is trying to slide tackle in that same direction. But then Sheshko changes his movement and goes on the other side and tricks the defender, eventually finishes the shot into the bottom right corner and scores a goal. So this is something that's very interesting because Sheshko likes to dribble inside the box a lot, and he is very successful at it. He receives the ball inside the area, he wiggles past this defender, and then he even jukes the goalkeeper, goes past him for a simple tap in. And I think this is where we see Sheshko's technicality shine the most because inside the area, he is massive. He's literally a giant inside the area, but he moves like a player with a much lower center of gravity. And that's why when it comes to these deep blocks that we keep mentioning there, where he has a marker to beat, he can actually do that inside a box because he was initially here among what 1, 2, 3, 4 players surrounding him and can still wiggle his way out and then score a tap in because he dribbles the goalkeeper as well. That's pretty fascinating to me, Dev.
That is absolutely. If he has that capability and if he can do that consistently, that's a skill set or a trait worth its weight in gold when you are facing teams that are hard to break down or where it's hard to convert a goal or score your chance.
Yeah, I think dribbling inside the box, as we'll see in the data as well, I'm sure, is something that he really likes to do and does really often. And we'll see if he can actually, yes, as you say, replicate that in La Liga, in Barca, if he is signed, obviously.
Yeah.
Now will show us a couple of video examples of this is the same situation. Look, dribbles one player, dribbles two players, scores a goal. This is the second situation that we also talked about. He receives the ball in space, so he can't attack space, right? If he is deployed from a deeper area, someone like Pedri or Pina, anyone, Frenkie de Jong, sends this ball into the space, he can run into the space, receive the ball, keep his calm, keep his composure, and actually retain the technical consistency that we know he has in these high transitional moments. And let's see what happens in this example. So he runs swiftly, changes direction, scores the goal. So this is a part of what he does, a really big part of what he does, and I think an important part of what he can bring to Barcelona as well. But there's also one more thing that I would like to discuss before we wrap this up, and that is his long distance shooting. Because as we keep saying, Šeško is a player who prefers power over placement. He shoots through the ball, laces to the ball, laces to the floor, and he just smacks it with everything he's got. That is a shot from quite far away. He doesn't really score in this situation because he hits the bar, but still, this is something that he likes. So look at that shot, or look at this next example. This rips the net. It can go through everyone. Barca do lack this particular thing, Dev, and we keep saying it. This is a low block killer.
If you get a player who can do this, I think last for Barca it was Rakitic, and many a game we had been saved because he could take a shot from a distance and score a goal, just like what Fede Valverde does for Madrid so many times. So if you have a player like this who has that shot from a distance and can convert, absolutely, there's no question about that. Look at that inside the penalty area, about his target, and just the efforts, the number of shots that he has taken, 89 of the total 142. That's a very high percentage. And then it's again power over placements, 35% from outside the penalty box, which is a pile driver, which is a long range shot. And look at that, that's a good number to hold. Obviously, that's where he's. And more than that, what I felt very good about was his positioning of those shots. And look at the goals, center, top. When he is, look at the positioning and tells you about how he sizes up. So it's from the left, it's from the right, it's from the center. And that's something that I also saw. Pretty mobile in terms of how he positions himself, because probably he likes that dribbling that you talked about. And a 21.8% goal conversion is pretty decent.
These goals inside the area that are of lower XG, that's where he usually dribbles his way out, because there's usually a lot of players in front of him, so the XG is automatically lower, but then he wiggles his way through them somehow and then scores the goal. Now, I think he does have to work on the easier quote unquote finishes because he can fluff his lines 1 versus 1. He can be a player who scores screamers, a player who scores outrageous dribbly goals. But then when it comes to those simpler finishes where he's 1-on-1 with the goalkeeper, he just has to be more composed and has to increase his lethality and conversion in those situations because that's how you actually rack up the numbers to elite levels. But he's not there yet.
Yep. XG map, again, not bad. Shots per 90, I think 2.5. That's not a bad number at all. Shot assists, again, if you look at the number of attempts that he is taking, a lot of them are long range. So a lot of them are long range shots that are coming into the box and then he's trying to assist. Some of them have been successful, some haven't. Against a low block, against a mid block, when we are running out of ideas and or just literally passing each other to oblivion, I think these kind of direct plays can possibly unlock. Along with this, he has a lethal shot that you saw. So I think those are a couple of good things that came immediately to my mind when I was going through the videos that you were showing, Tom.
So how he links up in La Liga with the rest of the Barca players around him, that will be the big question mark. As you keep saying, yes, exactly. A bit tighter on the marking, probably in La Liga, a bit more compact, a bit more deeper blocks. So how does he adapt to that as opposed to a more open Bundesliga game? That's the big question.
Passes into the penalty area. I think you look at the percentage. I think the percentage is good, even if per 90 it might not be a huge number from that perspective. But often you'll have to understand as a 9, he will be the one who will be inside the box. Even with that, the number of attempts that he has taken, the Blues are the ones that weren't successful, the Reds are the ones that were successful. So on. He covers that entire zone pretty much.
And these blue carries are very important because he can receive the ball a bit deeper and he can actually start his run. He often gets into the box, you can't stop him. He gets going when he's in full motion. We can see these blue lines, they end in the box. He gets into the box very quickly and very efficiently. And there's not much the defenders can do about it if he gets into that full stride because he is massive. And this is where his physicality actually comes into play and is a big attribute.
All right, let's look into crosses per 90. Again, not too many, but again, he's probably not one of those coming from the flank and not so much worried that he's not a crossing haven out here. But we have players who can do that. Dribbles, and Dom talked about dribbles, and you can see how much he loves doing that.
Look at those dribbles against centre backs. Like more than half of them are successful, and then he scores 7 goals after those dribbles. I think this is a very important thing to have. And so many are followed by a shot as well, so you can dribble inside the box and still keep possession and then shoot and even score goals quite often. So I think 57% of them are kept possession after more than half of those dribbles. And then if you consider that many are inside the area and then many are followed by a shot and many are followed by a goal, it's an incredible trade because, again, the tight marking La Liga will mean that he will have to rely on this quite often if he cannot be at the right place in the right time and score the easy goals, which he still struggles with. So it's more likely he scores these goals than the easier quote unquote ones. And I like this about him a lot.
Yeah, and look at the XG. It's 3.69. If you look at the total, if you just look at with center backs, it's 2.17. That's an insane XG to have inside the box after dribbling. Defenders will be afraid if you have somebody like that. He probably underachieves his XG by a huge amount, but I think over time, with skill, with practice, with good coaching, I think those conversion numbers can improve. What does worry me is this: he does lose a lot of balls, insane amounts. So it's control, especially when you are working in a team like Barca, where you have tons of control merchants like Pedri, like Gavi. They're all known for their control and their efficacy and accuracy and their ability to hold the ball under pressure. This can be a little bit of a challenging stat. If this is his consistent performance, the loss index is quite high, to be honest.
It depends, right? So when he, as we talked about earlier in the analysis, when he receives the marker on his back, he tries these fancy things. Right? He will try a back heel. He will try to turn a defender somehow out of nowhere. And sometimes these losses come from those things that he does on the pitch. The losses per 90 are creeping towards the right side, meaning that he's the player that loses a bit more balls than your average field player in the Bundesliga. How do we reduce that number? How do we make sure that he is not into situations where he has to be the super creative player in possession, where he has to do the flicks to get rid of the marker?
Now, just let's look into his passing overall. I think, again, the thing that I would say contribution to XG chain per 90, pretty good. Passes per 90, passes accuracy. I think those things can and will improve over time. His passing is something that Barca purists wouldn't take on very openly, not saying that they won't. So that's the one thing that we need to think about. My only question would be, when you size somebody like him and let's say a guy Corres, who'd you go for?
Between them two, I would go for Šeško, absolutely. It isn't your 20 or 30 goals a season striker yet. And does Barca need that kind of a player right now? I think if you're going to replace Lewandowski, then yes. If you're going to have someone who can be a rotation to Lewandowski, someone who can be an underside to Lewandowski, then that's fine. It all depends on how you position Šeško in this team. Do you position him as a player who has to start immediately and be a star immediately, or do you position him as a player who has the star potential but will need a year or two to get there?
That's it, guys. Go read the blog because there's a lot more detailed analysis, and you'll get a lot more insights into his playing style, strengths and weaknesses, and it's right there on our blog, so you can just check it out. It's free. It's like anybody can access it, and then probably the video will have more value. But if you don't want, that's fine. You can just go with the video as well. But that's on Benjamin Šeško. And with that, guys, stay safe, take care, and we'll see you on the next one. And be safe, Barza.